Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the AI Healthcare Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Reed, and today we are joined with Dr. William Greene, who's the CIO of Evolution Foundation. Thank you so much again for your time today, Dr. Greene.
Call me Bill, and it's great to be here.
We're glad you're here. And what led to your interest in medicine and then to healthspan?
Well, from a pretty young age, I was interested in the way things worked. I liked building things. I liked taking things apart, and I got interested in science, and really got interested in the way people got put together and the way people worked. So I always had a curiosity about biology and science, and as I uh, as I progressed, I really wanted to apply that to helping people. So I started off in science doing research and then transitioned to going to medical school so that I could apply that science in the furtherance of helping people. And that was just terrific. Really enjoyed taking care of people, really enjoyed doing clinical research. And that eventually led uh, to work in the biotechnology industry, developing new drugs. And it was really through that work in biotechnology, combined with seeing what was working in taking care of patients and bringing new medicines to patients, and frankly, what wasn't working. And what was working was lots of acute interventions for genetic diseases, even advances in cancer. But what became clear is that as our population ages, as all populations around the world are aging, we were really falling behind in medical solutions for people as they age. It just became glaringly obvious that the big technological gap, the big care gap, and the big approach gap was in treating and then hopefully eventually preventing these chronic debilitating diseases that we all seem to get. And it really just became a pull, curiosity and intellectual wise, but also a real driving mission for me to get into that space. And that's how I decided to orient the next stage of my career.
And you bring up an interesting point because it seems like the field of healthcare kind of has it's kind of has one foot in kind of that conventional way of thinking about things, but then you have this other foot that's like, how do we innovate and make sure that the treatments that are available and the devices that are available to patients actually not only lower costs but also improve health outcomes overall.
Absolutely. I think this is something that the healthcare system is starting to pay more attention to. Certainly, physicians are paying more attention and need to be. And we all know that this is what patients actually care about. Patients care about their outcomes. They care about their experience of disease and of treatment, their experience in the healthcare system. And we really need to be thinking about the underlying causality of these diseases and and prevention. I mean, it's what everybody wants and needs.
And so then would you say that we kind of really, not necessarily starting from square one when it comes to medical education, but really kind of looking at what we're teaching up and coming physicians and being like, we need to add this in, we need to take this out and kind of reorient to how we're teaching medical education in this country?
Well, I'm pretty sympathetic to the folks running medical schools.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's relatively easier to say we need more of this, and very hard to say we need less of that. The taking out's hard, and I sympathize with that. Having said that, there is no question, and I think that many of the more forward-thinking medical schools and medical systems have started to really add in both a focus on primary care and, with that, a focus on prevention as part of how they teach the overall approach to health, wellness, and sick care. Certainly, I think medical schools feel the dual need to, one, provide the best education in the world on how to take care of sick people, how to
Mm-hmm.
fix problems. And yet, we would lose so much if medicine simply became auto mechanics for humans, right? We have to be about more than that. We always have been uh, intellectually and spiritually, but have we been teaching people that approach? Are we teaching that approach forthrightly enough? And are we building in uh, how we will develop new therapies? That I think is coming as we invest more in health span technology, as we invest more in the science,
Mm,
discover approaches, and then translate those into new therapies, that will percolate its way back into education as well and become part of the fabric.
mhm. Awesome. And to change gears in the conversation a little bit on the investor side, so why should the health span space be a priority for investors?
From a purely investor perspective,
Hmm.
best and maybe only reason is it's a huge market and it's underserved. Now, there's more important reasons than that, but from an investor perspective, it is a huge market. For example, about 5% of people globally develop cancer in their lifetimes. And that's not a small number. But essentially, 100% of people develop chronic debilitating diseases of in part because we're living longer and we're experiencing the breakdowns of the way that aging develops. So you have 5% of people developing cancer and 100% of people developing chronic diseases of aging. And yet, in the venture capital world alone, there's been 20 times the investment in cancer companies as there's been in chronic disease and health span companies. That's a huge market dislocation and a huge opportunity.
And why is that? Like, why has there been so much more investment towards kind of the cancer rather than kind of the chronic and rare diseases? Like, the only thing that I can think of is that more people have it, which means you have a bigger pool to, to help. Is that?
Yeah,
But is there more complexities to it than that?
I think they're taken together. Rare diseases are not rare. Of course, each individual one is rare, but taken together, there's a lot of rare diseases, and there's great tools now to understand and treat them. Likewise, we've invested as a society huge amounts of money in cancer research, starting with the war on cancer going back 20 years, and that research has paid off. Intensely studying the biology of cancer has led to translational opportunities that have led to really effective therapies for cancer. And therefore, there's a lot of excitement among certainly patients, doctors, but investors to fuel that innovation and translate all that science into new therapies. So it's understandable and exciting why cancer and rare diseases have been popular with venture capital and biotech investors. With respect to chronic disease and health span, there's been, relatively speaking, underinvestment in geroscience, the study of aging biology, and the way that has led to and leads to the development of chronic diseases. So there's been less science, relatively speaking, less investment in the science. And translation has been difficult because sometimes these diseases don't become obvious early. They only become obvious later when it's harder to treat. So investors need to invest in companies that are translating that science into diagnosis and prevention. And I think, frankly, as a class, investors haven't seen as straightforward a path. That doesn't mean the path doesn't exist. It's just uh, capital flows to the less frictional areas, and there's been real opportunity in cancer and rare diseases. Evolution is here in some real way to show the way to great investment opportunities in this space, and we're doing so by investing heavily in more science. Big grant program, hundreds of millions of dollars in the hands of investigators to develop new knowledge about aging biology and how that biology leads to disease. And then with our investment program, start companies to exploit that, investing in translational companies to develop new therapies. And as we are showing our fellow investors that there's great companies to be invested in, great outcomes to be had, and that will catalyze a shift and is catalyzing a shift of investors into the space. And we're here to be the fulcrum to help really catalyze that shift into a more health span thinking about biotech, health span thinking about translation, and to get it into practice.
And how big is the market for health span sciences?
Well, it's been estimated that if we could add a year of healthy lifespan broadly to people's lives, which is to say, a year of healthy lifespan, not just living longer, but living longer in good health and productive health, being able to do things, that would add trillions of dollars to the economy. And if you think about it, it makes total sense because as we age, there are, relatively speaking, more and more older folks in society. And relatively speaking, fewer younger age workers. So if we don't invest in keeping older people vital, but also economic perspective productive, then we're missing out on all the wisdom that experienced people can bring, but also just all the productive energy to do work and to create value. So the market is literally unfathomably large for us, our families, but also societies around the world. This is something we have to do, and it is a really big opportunity.
And that leads into my next question nicely. So, what is interesting or unique about Evolution's approach to investing overall?
There's a couple things. One of them is as a mission-driven foundation, we are here to create knowledge, to encourage the translation of that knowledge, and make pragmatic and practical for people. Bring that knowledge to people in the form of solutions. And as a mission-driven organization, that's what we're here to do. We're not here to do one. Sorry, I'm going to turn my light back on. We're not here to do one piece of that or one part of that. We're here to catalyze that entire spectrum, and we work together within Hevolution deeply with our science and grant making team, deeply with our policy and advocating team to create a real seamless vision of scientific thought generation, scientific knowledge creation, translation into product and company opportunities, and to develop those through the therapeutic pipeline. So we take a very integrated view. We, by definition, exist to be a little bit brave, to take some science and technical risk that others may not feel ready to take yet. And by
Mhm.
de-risking that science, by de-risking those early investments, we encourage our fellow investors to come in with us and we show them the way. So we're leaders in catalyzing the field and convening. And we're doing that with our investment activities, and we're doing it with our Global Health Span Summit, which brings together upwards of 2,000 people in a really unique way to talk about and share knowledge about geroscience and health span biology, all the way from early discovery through translation, through delivery to people. So we're convening interested parties, we're teaching new people about health span, and we are investing our capital both in knowledge generation and translation. And that is unique and different than a pure investor or a pure philanthropic grant making organization.
So, you actually brought up an interesting point. So, just general awareness around kind of health span sciences, specific geosciences included in that. But how has investment in healthy aging changed since you first started in the space, and how are investors getting more involved in health span technologies overall?
I think we're starting to see the shift that Hevolution exists to catalyze. We Since we began operating a couple of years ago, we've really seen the conversation advance. The more investigators applying for our grants, with lots of investigators applying for our grants. Uh, we see publications now from research reporting. We're seeing that our peer venture capitalists are coming to us, looking to us for advice on investing in this field. We're seeing more capital flowing into the field. We're seeing companies dedicated to health span research and to underlying causal um, therapies for disease getting financed. Now, that's led both from increased knowledge, and on the other end, the big pharma world has really paid attention. They're they know that they need to be developing therapies for large populations with large problems. Uh, They've invested heavily in rare diseases, they've invested heavily in cancer, but we're seeing pharma companies come to us curious about investing in this space and about companies developing drugs in this space. We've started something called the Breakthrough Innovation Alliance, which brings together leaders from the global pharmaceutical world, the venture capital world, and the entrepreneurial world with our science leaders at Hevolution to really think about what the next generation of breakthrough therapies could be, and then really ideate and think about how can we start companies around this that pharma will invest in. Finally, as the global scourge of obesity, metabolic disease, and chronic diseases of aging has advanced, of course, pharma has taken notice of that, and their early success with novel treatments for diabetes and obesity has really taught them how strong the opportunity is and how strong the scientific opportunity is. So we're really seeing a shift now. It's starting to happen. It's taken a couple of years, but we're starting to see people come along and join us on this journey.
And how do you see Evolution contributing to the greater conversation of investing in health span sciences, specifically in AI?
Specifically in AI. Okay. Um, several ways. First, AI in the life sciences has been a tool. It's been a tool for drug discovery. It's been a tool for uh, modifying molecules to maybe be more efficient as drugs, and that's important. But the bigger opportunity, I think, is AI as a tool to understand how diseases of aging develop, or to understand that earlier, to find the subtle signs, perhaps, in people's biology or history that will lead them down a path of less aging rather than more healthy aging, and then to explicate how does that turn into disease so that we could really understand how these forks in the road happen earlier before uh, much harder to treat disease has really become apparent. That's a big opportunity in AI, and we are embracing that. In fact, we are working within Hevolution to fund efforts in understanding how people before they become patients, how their biology, how their personal resilience, uh, and their bodies react to their environment over time. So we're going to be doing so-called longitudinal studies to actually collect that data, and then AI is an indispensable tool in helping design those studies and understand that data, and then to use as a predictive tool for which patients to enroll in clinical trials, what sorts of so-called endpoints to look for in our therapies. So we'll be incorporating AI throughout the discovery and development process, and to understand how these diseases develop. Now, that's a big task. That's a lot of tasks. But we think AI is really important. And we think evolution is in a pretty interesting position to take advantage of these emerging technologies because we really think holistically from idea to science to translation to patients.
Oh, no, no, that's fascinating. And that also leads into my last question nicely. So, what do you think governments and policymakers need to understand about the importance of continuing to invest in health span sciences to progress healthcare, which includes improving patient outcomes, but also decreasing costs globally?
Well, I think one of the things that policymakers uh, should keep in mind is that not only are constituents caring about their outcomes more than a whole bunch of other things. If you ask people what they really care about, they care about health, they care about their families. This is what people care about. They care about being productive. Uh, they care about extending the time in which they feel vital, not just being alive to pay taxes, right? So policymakers should understand that this is something people care about in some ways more than anything else when you get right down to it. Secondly, policymakers should definitely keep in mind that an investment in mitigating or even avoiding chronic disease pays off massively, much much more even than investments in staving off, or, in treating diseases once they're established. So the opportunity is huge. The need and attention among people is huge. And just as we see that real impact was made in cancer from a concerted effort among policymakers, scientists, and politicians to invest in understanding and finding new treatments for that disease, it can work.
Oh, wow. And Dr. Greene, where can people find more about your work and about you, as well as Hevolution and kind of what they're working on too, as well?
So a very accessible way is hevolution.com. Our website has a lot of information, uh, including our senior executives. We're all on LinkedIn, so you can find out a lot about us by looking us up individually. And we'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. And be sure to subscribe to the AI Healthcare Podcast YouTube channel, as well as listen to this audio version of this podcast interview on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Dr. Greene, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you.
And this is